At some point, you got to take the leap. But luckily for myself, I was able to dip the toe in and do buying an existing business with positive cash flow while still having a full-time job. If you can do that, great. If not, yeah, you've just got to weigh up the risk versus reward, and if you have the capacity to do those things.
Hello, everybody. It's Pete Liston here, and welcome to the Military Mindset for Business podcast, the podcast for the veteran business community. Now, I've got Kevin Kidd here today. Kevin, how you going?
I'm doing great out in sunny Brisbane, so I can't complain.
Brilliant, mate. Now, if there's one thing that stops everybody in their tracks, it is a jet plane. Now, I was at Avalon Air Show just last week, and no matter all my military experiences, no matter how many times I've seen jets fly over, noting that I am an AJ, there is nothing that's like that I love more than seeing a jet fly past. So I really want to unpack your experience about being in flight crew. Before we go into the military side of your career, though, Kevin, where did you grow up? Tell us a little about your upbringing.
So I was born in the UK, 1985, so that makes me pretty old, but old enough to run a business. Yeah, my parents decided to move to Australia in 1992 when I was 6 years old, out over to Perth, and they've been loving it ever since, which kind of helped me out because the UK is not really doing too well these days in terms of opportunities. I grew up there, had a great childhood with my brother, and then there's not much to say about where I grew up and what happened there. Nothing out of the ordinary, nothing too, outstanding there. But went through school and graduated high school in 2002, with then a sort of segue into military life. There's a couple of years there where I just did truck driving, went and worked in the mines for a bit, did some fly in, fly out stuff, just those sort of things.
So just a regular Aussie kid, growing up in the neighborhood. Now, when I was probably around 12 to 20, there was these weekly magazines that used to come out. I can't remember what they're called. It wasn't Top Gun or something like that, but every week there'd be a new sort of fighter jet, fascination magazine come out. And to be honest, I was always keen as to join the Air Force. Were you sort of Air Force specific, or was it just the military in general that you're interested in?
I was a very weird kid, I guess, in that I finished high school and chose subjects that would give me access to as many opportunities as possible. So I didn't grow up particularly with an ADF or military thought or mindset. It was just kind of a way to move into a job. I didn't feel like university was for me, and I didn't know what to do. So I went initially tried to apply for pilot in the Air Force, but my hands and feet are quite terrible. I'm not good with the finesse when we're doing loops and other things. So they suggested another avenue of aircrew, which was called Air Combat Officer, which is those sort of things in the back of the P8, the back of the wedge tail, and all those supplementary aircrew roles that can be filled.
But aircrew came a bit later. The first step into the ADF door was avionics technician. Is that right?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, my hands and feet were quite terrible. So I went through flight screening, and they said, you're not too good at this. So they kind of just said, hey, we need avionics technicians. I was like, okay, I'm not doing much else with my life. I'll go travel around and do some cool stuff.
Yeah.
So there we go.
Was flight screening that course at Tamworth where you turn up and you're in the Cap 10s and CT4s, is it?
Yeah, you do 7 flights in the CT4 and 3 in the Cap 10, just testing your abilities essentially and how you learn the aerial maneuvers and 3D options.
I got to admit, I was lucky enough to do that course when I was at first year at Duntroon to go and have a play, and I was accepted into Aviation Corps and Army, but for reasons I won't discuss, I made a different choice and went into Ramey. But what should have, could have, would have been. So where do you go do your avionics technician training at first up?
So I did recruit training in Adelaide, which is now closed down and it's out in Wagga. But from there went to Wagga to do my trade training, which was AvTech. It was about a year and a little bit. Yeah, again, fairly insignificant. Unsurprisingly, not much happening out there apart from learning the trade. Although I did ducks that course, which I guess was an indication of what I'll do next.
Mm. What platforms or planes were you working on as AvTech?
I stupidly went back to my hometown in Perth, so I was only working on the Hawks, which are a trainer aircraft for the RAF, and they're nothing too fancy. You don't get to go anywhere really cool, so that kind of dulled my appetite for that trade for a while. But I did get 6 months over at one squadron on the Super Hornet, so that was kind of my way out.
Yep. So you've seen the option to go to flight screening, turn up to Tamworth, you do your 10 flights up there. And for me, when I did that course, I had never been in the front of a plane before. So I found it quite daunting, the speed of learning, from never flying before to, the 10th flight having to loop the loops and aileron rolls and half spins and whatever it is. How did you find that pace of learning? Were you able to keep on top of it?
Yeah, the pace learning wasn't particularly a problem. It was more, I actually get airsick, which is surprising for most people when I tell them that. I still do to this day when it's low level and hot. So it was more the getting past the physical limitations than the speed of learning there.
Yeah. So flight screening, you don't get that automatic tick in the box to go be a pilot, but they're like, hey, why don't you come down and have a look at electronic warfare? So where's the progression across now into the dark side and becoming an officer?
So the actual timeline goes such that when I joined as NavTech, they just kind of put me in there to fill whatever needs they needed. And then from there, I was straight away again trying to get to be a pilot. So I went back again through the pilot pipeline. They said no again, and they actually offered me air combat officer, which is nothing to do with fast jets yet. It's like you have been accepted to be an aircrew person, and then later on you get streamed into which role best suits you. That was so 2010 is when I finally got the go ahead, and then 2011 to 12 is when I actually got to go to officer training school in Sale to become an officer. Then
is this, and again, I don't know a lot about the RAF, to be honest. But are these like, so when we in the army, we go to Duntroon. It's an 18-month course, how to be a general officer. Because these are the skills that, every ground officer will need, how to command a platoon and do basic attacks and things like that. Is it similar in Air Force where this stream are the basic skills that regardless of where you are in flight crew, you're going to need these tenets or skills?
Yeah, so every officer goes to either ADFA or officer training school. And as a direct entry, I went to officer training school, which was 17 weeks at Sale, a lot less than RMC, obviously. And you learn all the fundamentals. I wouldn't say all, but a baseline of fundamentals in leadership, drill, management of people, those sort of things. And then from there, you actually go to your, again, trade training. So myself, I went to the School of Air Warfare, which was in Sale as well. And we start off as a cadre of aircrew, and we go through 10 flights again in the back of a King Air, a KA-350, again, to learn and understand how you best fit into the ADF and RAF machine. Then at the very
you haven't necessarily, after you?
So then at the very end of that, you get streamed into which aircraft you're best suited for, whether that's the back of the Wedgetail, the back of the P8 or P3 back then. You could become an air refueling officer. And then some of those that don't do very well or are a different mindset go to sort of air traffic control and other sort of positions like that.
Got it. What does an electronic warfare officer even do? Is it controlling the battle space in the sky?
No. So I try to liken it to Goose out of Top Gun because that's what everyone's seen. So Goose is the back of the F-18 Super Hornet, and they drop bombs and they shoot the bad guys in the air. The electronic warfare officer is the same position, same frame of jet, but instead of having a gun and missiles most of the time, we have jamming pods and listening pods and a bunch of other electronic countermeasures and electronic listening means so that we can, as flying overhead, we can infiltrate communications, we can degrade, deny, and sometimes spoof those either communications, positioning systems, those sort of things. So electronic warfare officer in its crux leads to the point of the front end of the battle space in the air, managing the electronic domain in terms of, yeah, everything you can think of, including surface-to-air missiles, air-to-air radars, those sort of things.
So obviously the big kid in me is still really fanboyed in terms of just like, you know, fast air and jets and that kind of stuff. Can you share with what was your first experience like, you know, taking off in fast air?
It was less like the first fast jet we get to go in is the Hawk, which
Yeah.
for me is, nostalgic. I go back to Perth and I'm flying in the same jet that I was working on. And funnily enough, a lot of the maintainers there are still there. So I'm yakking to them and having a good time. So, and the Hawk is, it's a good jet. It's nimble, but it's not a Super Hornet. It's not a Growler. So yes, it was invigorating and slightly nervous, but then stepping into the big boy jets is again another level. You jump in there and the noise, the movement, the G's, everything is just, brings yourself to life for a while.
Mm. How do you feel? What's it like getting to the unit? You know, with you get wings as in the back seat, two wings, one wing. I'm not sure.
Yeah, two wings. So once we graduate School of Air Warfare, we get our wings and we go to our unit for operational conversion training. And yeah, it's phenomenal. You get to go into, a new place with all these massive toys, massive jets
Yeah.
everywhere, people doing things, they know what they're doing. And then there's a plethora of abilities throughout the squadron. There's like me coming in as a new guy, and then there's, those top level FCI fighter controller instructors or, top level people who know every single thing about the jet, every single thing it can and can't do, and then how to get the best out of it.
And what's you know, rocking up with your aviators, do you is there a sense of humbleness in the unit, or everybody you're in an elite company now? Like there's got to be some kind of, the rising tide floats all boats kind of momentum being around all of those people in that community. What's the vibe of the unit like?
So Air Combat Group, especially where all the fighter jets are housed, is full of alpha people. So there's a lot of people who, for better or worse, know they're the best, and then
Mm.
also want to be the best. So there's no second place. There's no, oh, you do it instead of me. Everyone wants to take the lead. No one wants to be -3. No one wants to be -4. They want to be the top of there, and it's an environment that's astounding, to be quite honest, and that I've never been pushed that far that quickly before.
So, so again, depending on an individual, whether it's collegiate or competitive, and just the natural hierarchy starts to fill out the pecking order.
Yeah, and then obviously there's categories of people who've been there longer and know more stuff, and they have more of the say of who's doing what and when, and you fall into line pretty quickly and know who's who and who to listen to and who not to.
How many times a week do you actually fly in the sky? Like how obviously in the sky, but how often are you up in the plane versus being in the classroom, being in the lecture room, doing planning activities?
During initial training, it's heavily classroom based at the start, and then you fly once, twice, 3 times a week. But then as you're in the squadron, it's every day, sometimes twice a day, and depending on your capability level, you can fly many, many times, just either
Yeah.
due to lack of other people there to instruct or because you want to.
And do you really create this sort of ghost Mav? I hate to use the Top Gun cliches, but that relationship with the guy front seat, back seat, or do you sort of rotate and swap around a little bit?
Yeah, so that's a bit of a misnomer from the films there, that we just go with whichever pilot is available, whichever backseat is available, whichever one has a need for an upgrade or a readiness flight, or there's no pairing with a front person, but you do get to know them pretty well. You fly with them quite often, so you can kind of pick who can do what, who can't do what, and you can preempt some of the stuff that's coming up with a lot of them after you fly a while.
Yeah. So it's one thing to be, go through your training, you get your wings, you're in your operational unit now and cracking on. Talking deployment. So what year did you first get your first operational unit?
So, funnily enough, this is a weird one for me. I went to the US in 2015 and didn't spend a lot of. I spent almost no time actually in a Australian operational unit. So I went over there to VAQ 129, which is the training unit, trained with them for a bit, and then 6th Squadron got the Growlers in 2016, which I helped facilitate bringing those all back to Australia. And then apparently, because I was good enough, they left me back there with VAQ 135 in the operational US Navy unit. So from then till 2020, I was operational with the US Navy in the Growler. And
So what's that, 4
funny,
years with the
yeah,
US Navy?
5 years actually in the end.
5 years, yeah.
Yeah. And funny little anecdote, I believe it's still true, is I'm the only Australian Growler aircrew that's flown combat missions in the Growler.
So just going back, and I'm got to think about our, tank brethren in the army. Like the tanks, unless Ukraine's got them, never got to deploy in their capability. We've never deployed Growler in its operational capability. Is that right? In Afghanistan or other theaters?
As an Australian platform, no. The US have, and they do it constantly. So me being on exchange with the US Navy and then deploying with them, it was a unique situation that actually went through quite high levels of certification and authorization.
Can we unpack your deployment? So what year is this? What year did you first deploy into theater?
2018, 2019. So end of 2018, around Halloween, I went into LUD'd.
LED'd in Qatar Air Base?
Yep.
Yep. So just can you set the scene of what's going on in the Middle East at the moment? We've got Afghanistan at a kind of drawdown period, but where are we with, can you just bring me up to speed on ISIS, ISIL, Iraq, Syria? What's going on in that space?
So funnily enough, actually, the US Navy usually has a continuing rotation to Japan. And my squadron was slated to go to Japan at that time. But 3 weeks prior to that, they actually switched us to CENTCOM due to some outbreaks and requirements to facilitate ISIS and some outbreaks of those. As you mentioned, Afghanistan was drawing down. Iraq and Syria had become a bit more slow, but there had been some insurgents coming out there. So our location of LUD was actually to facilitate operations into Afghanistan on a very minor basis, and then also operations into Iraq and Syria on a more pointed and as required basis there.
Can you share, within reason, the kind of jobs that you were doing on operations over there?
So the Afghanistan was more of an overwatch and a kind of caretaker type role. We'd go in and just have a stack of aircraft every now and then just to keep the peace, but that sort of wound out and stopped happening towards the end of my deployment. But Iraq, Syria, there was a bit more going on there. There was some high-level people that they were actually targeting, and there was probably 2 out of the 3 missions I was slated to do, I was allowed to do. There was a couple there which I wasn't allowed to just because of who they were going for and the Australians, I guess, ability to allow me to go and do those things. Yeah. From there, it was we'd go out with a stack of F-15s, A-10s, C-130s, tankers, Wedgetails, everything. Yeah. And so daily flights would be more of a overwatch listening, propaganda type situation. But then there's probably 20 to 30% of the flights would be midnight, 2 a.m. Actual attacks on a certain person in a certain place. And my role as the electronic warfare officer is to, as I mentioned before, get into the communication systems and pull out intelligence and or deny those communications and GPS.
Yeah, I did have a little bit of a fanboy smile there, just thinking about F-15s and A-10s. I do remember a short time being at Kandahar Airfield, I think maybe 2012, and again, just in awe of seeing, the F-16s or whatever those things are with the planes that go out in the front and they come up the top again.
The Ospreys, yeah.
Yeah, Ospreys.
Just seeing a few of those out there.
And just literally seeing the combat firepower of, the US military. It is just gobsmacking when you see this stuff in theater. F-16s flying off to do sorties. And how did it feel to be a small but humble part of that big dynamic force?
It was quite amazing because obviously Australia can't project in those quantities as you mentioned. And even just walking down the flight line, there's 30, 40 tanking aircraft. There's 6 or 7 B1 aircraft. There's 4 or 5 Ospreys. There's 6 Growlers. There's 20 F-18. Like there's just a staggering amount of aircraft. And even those coming in and out is something you particularly don't see in Australia. So it's amazing and yeah, flabbergasting when you look at it.
Right, this is again the little kid in me is getting exciting. Where does your career come back to Australia now? What was the driving force for you to come back and leave the time with the US Navy?
So 2020 was my actual end of exchange. That was always the plan and always what intended for me. And they sent out another person to take over from me. So I got back in 2020 into 6th Squadron at Brisbane, the Growler Squadron there, and that was always the intention. So that's how I came back.
So 2020, lucky enough to have had operational deployment spirit. Now, are they US operation medals? Did you get Australian service recognition as well for that?
Yeah, I've got some Australian the Active Service Medal, and then a couple of US Navy Active Service Medals, as well as what they call a Navy Achievement Medal. So with 2 stars on that, that's just for things I've done specifically relating to for the US Navy.
Aircraft carriers? Did you get to jump up and down?
Just the training in VAG 129. They send you onto the boat for the pilot's qualifications, and I get lucky enough to go and get qualified, but never actually stand there.
Okay, perfect. But in the back seat, I guess if you're on and off aircraft carrier, it's the guy in the front seat that you want to have the level of confidence to get it up and down.
Yeah, quite honestly, landing and takeoff, the pilot does all the work in the area for the Growler. The backseater does all the work.
Yeah, and that's because the Growler, again, I don't know a lot about the airframe itself, but what does it actually carry apart from its electronic warfare? What does it carry for defense, self-defense, attack on the plane?
So it can carry everything the F-18 Super Hornet can, but typically it'll just carry 2 AIM-120 missiles, which are air-to-air missiles. And then that's basically all we have air-to-air defensive, because we're not supposed to be fighting the air-to-air fight. We're supposed to be protecting the air-to-air and air-to-ground people. Additionally, we have HARM and ARGM, which are anti-radiation missiles, which can fire at those things on the ground emitting. So if there's someone shooting from the ground, we can fire something back at them.
Got it. And you'd also, again, been up there with the team. There's other people performing that role of the air defense, but you just carry those couple for a bit of self-help is the best help if needed.
Yeah, I mean, the stations there that are made for those weapons, so there's no point in going without them. Yeah, funny story as well. My call sign when I was in the US Navy became Arizona. And that's because Arizona is actually the call sign brevity for I have no air-to-ground munitions left. And that came about because I tried to test fire anti-radiation missiles twice and they both failed. So yeah, that came out pretty quick.
How did you settle back, with the family? Because I noticed, you've got a family now. Where are you in that journey of your life?
So that was actually surprisingly a daunting, and I'm going to go a bit dark here in this part. But so before I left from my deployment in 2018, I actually separated with my current wife, who was living in the US with me, and I had he was a 6-year-old boy at that point, so they were there. So we were separated in the US, technically still living together. So on return to Australia in 2020, we initiated the proceedings for divorce. So that sort of solidified mid-year there. But in the last 4 years now, I met a new girl, and I just got married last year. So back on track there. But the return to Australia was rocky, and that goes into some of the reasons I did leave the military in the end, because family and stability was becoming a major part of my life.
Yeah, it's interesting is the separation rate in the military is so high. Like I have a divorce from a military life. I had basically a dear John and came home to an empty house in Afghanistan. So after my Afghanistan deployment, and But the way that life rolls on, and my next chapter of my life with new wife and a couple of kids, it's all things are a blessing in the end, I guess. But
Yeah, I
what?
think I'm pretty lucky now. I've got a great new wife and my
Yeah.
kid, and we're going to look to have some more shortly, so it'll be fun.
Uh, Congratulations, man. That's great news. So, but what's it like coming from, I guess, the tempo or operational focus of US Navy deployments, operations in real time, doing the real job, back to a somewhat quieter, if any, tempo in Australia, apart from the training environment. Is that the case?
It is the case to some degree. It's kind of stark when you've been in the US Navy for 5 years and you come back and the tempo is there, but it's more of a training tempo. There's no operational, I wouldn't say no operational focus, but there's no end operation that you're going to deploy to. The US Navy has a rotation of people going to operational areas and they know they're going every year. Whereas
Yeah.
the Australian squadron just was, I didn't see a goal, I didn't see an end point. It was just training for the sake of training.
I really feel for the obviously peace is a great thing, and I'm not trying to diminish the current state of affairs. However, I was in inverted commas very lucky to go through my training at RMC and spend time in the army with such a high operational tempo. Like it was almost impossible not to get a deployment somewhere. Like whether it be Iraq when I first got out, I didn't go to Iraq, but the lads going to Iraq, the Timor trips are rotating, the Solomons are on, Afghanistan's on. It's like, and that's nothing to do with whatever's happening in the SOCOM world. There was just such a high tempo, and I sort of feel somewhat for the young men and women in the ADF at the moment that you know are they actually having the chance to practice this stuff in real time? And again, it's a bit of an oxymoron, you know what I mean? Like in terms of peace is great and we want the stability, but from a professional perspective, it's almost tough.
Well, it's like if you're, playing in the NFL and you're training every day but never get to play a game,
Yeah.
it becomes a bit, tiring on yourself. And you come to a purposeful thing of what am I doing? Why am I doing this?
And do you think that had much to do with your decision to transfer out of regular or full time service?
That had a fair bit. There was probably 50% that, 50% of the family situation where I didn't know why I needed to be moving around anymore or doing these things if there's no end state. And also, going through the divorce and stuff, I kind of wanted to settle myself and my son down somewhere, which we have
Yeah.
in Brisbane now.
Right. Bris Vegas, mate. What a spot. So you managed to remain serving. What's your role, if you can share, in the current ADF at the moment?
So at the moment, I'm EWO for 82 Wing at in Brisbane. I do a lot of um, procedures and template and document writing. So a few smaller things there, but I attend some of the exercises as a subject matter expert for non-kinetic effects, which is anything to do with things that don't blow up. So including
Yep.
stuff like cybersecurity, OSINT, those sort of things. But for the last 4 years, there was periods there where I worked for SOCOM in the Information Warfare Division. I pop in and out of wargaming things and those sort of stuff as well. So I've had about 4 years of varying reserve work, depending who wants and needs that expertise.
No chance of getting back up in the sky at all in a reserve role?
Not in a reserve role, probably not, unless something
Yeah.
happens that I'm not aware of in the next few years.
Like I said, there's plenty of other lads and or guys and girls that want those flying hours.
Yeah.
I noticed on your resume that you did a bit of time with Two Commando, probably in this role. How did you find? You've now worked with US Navy, and now are obviously a RAF. How did you find working with Two Commando?
It kind of felt like going home a little bit, to be honest. Like, so some of my work on deployment was actually with the US SOCOM, some of the
Yep.
things they were doing there. So coming back here and getting into information warfare, some of the social media scrapes, some of the OSINT that they do, and then just getting some feelers of the human and things they are doing. Um, that stuff's very interesting to me in terms of the whole social engineering, penetration testing, anything to do with cyber as well has become more of a interest for me these days as well.
All right. So a pretty, I won't say a deep dive in your military career. There's in the 30 odd minutes or so, there's a lifetime of experience and adventure there. But what started scratching this entrepreneurial itch is when does business start jumping up on your personal radar in terms of either building your own personal capability and wealth, or when's this sort of thing? Well, what's my next chapter here?
That came about a year ago, to be honest. So I left the military and joined Boeing in Phantom Works as an operations analyst, working on what's next, what's the future, some business capture stuff there. And that kind of put me into a whole new arena of like, there's other people doing things that I've never seen or heard of before. And
Yeah.
also there's people who know how to, talk to the right people to get business, to get money, to get these things. And that was just completely wild to me that I didn't have to just work for someone and do what they told me to do. So then a year ago, I thought, hey, I could, I started thinking I should start or at least run a business, a minor one, to be honest. I didn't really want to do anything big, but events conspired such that I now have 15 employees and a fairly large business over in Perth.
Just before we unpack the business bit, and I'll jump right into it, tell us about that shifting culture between ADF to big corporate in Boeing. Like, how did you find you morphed into that world? Because did you leave the ADF, then go Boeing for a couple of years and then decide business? Because you still got reserve in the background here.
I left the military, went to Boeing while still doing reserve work, and then started a business while still doing full-time business work as well. So Boeing
Cool.
work. So I do a few things. I actually started a full-time study as well during that 4-year period. So I got my grad diploma in strategic leadership and master's in international relations and master's in data science.
And I think I always say busy people are going to be busy, and as soon as you stop, that's when you don't start, rest or relaxation is fine for a point, but for me, it probably more leads to stagnation rather than achievement. So I just love to keep churning. And so hang on, full-time job, start studying, reserve Air Force on the side. I might kick a business off. Tell us about the business.
Well, it was more of so I started a clothing brand business, a very small and online with Shopify and that. And I was like, oh, this isn't really working. So shut that down. And then I talked to a few people about, I'm thinking about buying a business or, running a business. And then talked to my brother who's over in Perth. He's like, hey, the owners of my current company are retiring soon and they're looking to sell. So I was like, oh, do I want to take on that sort of role? But went and talked to them, had a meeting with them, started seeing what they were after, and they had valid reasons for selling. They're great people. They built a big business from, over 30 years, and there's constant profit. So I was like, hey, maybe this is something I should look more seriously into. So I did. I met with them more, went through a bunch of numbers, accountant, forecasting. My data science came in handy there. So I did a lot of work in the background in terms of its profitability and future focus. And then January of this year, actually, we settled on the business and I took over as sole director and have my brother running the logistics side and I have a sales manager running the sales side.
So I just want to think about this. So many people think that they need to start a business by starting it up, bootstrapping. I'm good at doing this, so now I'm going to do this. I'm going to create a business about it. That is, fine for some, but it's slow. It takes there's a lot of risk. How well did you feel with your acumen, your training, because you're good at this thing over here in the military? How well did you feel that you were able to assess the opportunity of that business to make the right decision on it?
I felt very confident actually towards the end, especially because the military prepares you for digging deep, figuring out all the problems, all the eventualities, all the things that could go wrong, and then putting things in place to mitigate those or at least minimize those. So through going through all the numbers, all the forecasting, I was like, hey, the risk here is actually fairly low to me, and the reward is actually quite high. So I guess, yeah, the military sort of training and background there kind of came in spades that I could sort of just pick out every single possible eventuality and then find ways to mitigate those in the long term.
How long did the diligence process take from, first exploration to signing on the line?
It took about a year. So from our first initial meeting to getting rudimentary numbers to going through some more info, for me meeting with some of the employees and some of the suppliers and customers, and then my accountant getting even more numbers and we're going through that as well. It probably could have been shorter, probably could have been about 6 months, but I stretched it out a little bit so it'll fit with my timeline, which is a little selfish, but at the end of the day, it worked out for myself and the previous owners.
Okay, so my journey into business was kicked off with spectacular failure. First of all, I thought I could. I was a former farmer and a flower grower before I joined the military. So when I was posted to Coogee in the eastern suburbs, I thought I'll just sell flowers to people in the east. How hard can it be? Better ideas have been had in the world. But then businesses since again have been bootstrapped and driven from the ground up. Now, what that's delivered for us is some great experience in the pillars of business, marketing, sales, and accounting, finance, operations, and people. There's a lot that we get from the military, but in the way that you've gone about this, utterly, this is about team development, effective delegation, understanding your strengths, and empowering the people in your team to do what they're good at. You don't actually necessarily need to be SME at every single thing.
Yeah, that's
How
correct.
are you running that in your structure now?
So quite honestly, and I'll say this point blank, I have no idea what furniture costs, what it looks like, how to put it together, those sort of things. But my brother, who's been working there for 8 years, knows the product inside and out, and the customers and delivery systems and all that. And the sales manager, who's been there for 4 years, again, knows the products, everything inside out. So my initial task, my initial direction when I went in was like, okay, my brother, you're the general manager of logistics, and my sales manager, Karen, you handle all the sales. Like, the employees can come to me if they have a major problem, but they should not be talking to me about daily tasks and problems, because they know what's required, and I don't. I know how to do accounting, back end, business development. I don't know how to, put an invoice in for a sale on a chair or something.
How involved are you in the business on a daily, weekly basis? Like, it's one thing to be an owner; it's just another thing to be an operator. Are you in a weekly sync? You're doing prayers, every day. What's your cadence involvement in the business?
So every day I do accounts at nighttime, so just to make sure things are running smoothly, and then anything that pops up during the day, I'll just squash essentially. But once a week, once every 2 weeks, I have a chat with the two GMs, see where they're at, what's going on, and then I present them with the roadmap of near, medium, far. So near is what we need to do in the next month. Medium is what we need to do in the next 6 to 12 months. And then what I'm thinking further beyond that. I actually had a discussion with my sales manager the other day, and I was saying, I'd like to expand into South Australia, Adelaide. She's like, what? I'm like, that. Don't worry, that's the far. It's fine. We're going to get there, but that's the far thoughts and far ideas.
I'm a little bit fascinated by this, Ryan, because coming from and acknowledging that you don't have any expertise in the micronucleus of this space, but being able to set a vision of where you're exploring opportunity. How are you actually drawing out or assessing opportunity in the far space?
That's just pie in the sky ideas from myself, quantified by a lot of research, lot of research. So, I have access to a lot of market capabilities in WA as well as South Australia, as well as the East Coast. And then we go back to the whole risk versus reward thing. Like, if I set up on the East Coast, how hard is that? How hard is it to get into market share? Those sort of things. And a lot of this, quite honestly, is things I've learned from just research over and over again, looking at different things, even talking to people that may not have an idea in this space, but have an idea of business and what might be the future. So point from that, like, my current wife's dad owns a car yard out here in Brisbane, and he's been running it for 30 or 40 years. So no idea about office furniture, but he knows about business and knows who I can talk to and what things I should put in the contract or look out for.
Yeah.
So that helps a lot too.
It's sounding like you're really loving the journey of being a business owner and doing that exploration research and doing the product to market fit and where are the opportunities sitting out there.
Yeah, I like the idea of expanding the business. It's been the previous owners were very good. They built the business, but they hadn't made any efficiencies in the process. So every system was air gapped and offline. Everything was printed out and stored in files. So almost all of that has been wiped clean now, and some of the stuff is scared.
Yeah. No, okay. I love this stuff. Right. I've got one of the three things that I love to talk about in business all the time is systemize, automate, and delegate. So first of all, there's no people problem until you fixed a process problem. So there's something going wrong. People generally want to do the right thing, and if they're missing up or not hitting their objectives, then what's the process behind this? Have you been able to really deep dive into that business from a process perspective using that analytical, training that you've got from the military?
Yeah, so I essentially and even with some of the prototyping things in AI and artificial intelligence and stuff I do now, I've managed to look at almost every system and process and been like, that can be done by a computer with a simple script. That can be done online with a cloud. Someone else can do it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that are manually led at the moment or have been that are easily wiped out.
I love this stuff. I love this whole mentality around keeping yourself at that point of elevation and not diving into the weeds. There is probably 1,000 things that you could do if you wanted to get into the weeds and get into the details of every single person's job. But would ultimately you being empowering them, helping them solve the problems in the future, or are you just going to be like a rod for their back? So this is
Yeah,
really cool. This whole delegation mentality into business, a brand new business as well.
my genuine response to most things people ask me is, "Have you Googled it?" Because
Yeah,
essentially they'll ask me a question. I'm like, that's a question you could Google and probably get the answer before even asking me.
yeah. Well, and that's what I'm going to do. You ask me, I'm probably going to Google it. So
Exactly.
yeah, yeah, go and have a look yourself. Now this is really cool. So businesses in Perth. Is there any reason why you're resisting the temptation to come east side? Close? Is this a result of deliberate research that Adelaide and South Australia is the opportunity and not just the easy path of coming back to Brizzy?
The easy path personally is Brisbane, obviously, but the easy path for the business is staying away from the East Coast at the moment. We don't have the capacity or ability to function fully across Australia at the moment, where Adelaide's actually closer to Perth to some degree. We can get into the mining sites a bit more and some other options there. So that's probably the best area, I think, for a market share that we can get into easier than the East Coast.
And one thing I've missed is tell us some detail about Access Office Industries. What is it you actually do?
Oh, so we supply any kind of office furniture you can think of to government, health, finance, schools, uh, any of those sort of things. We've done major fit outs for the Fremantle Library as well as finance places. Even the Navy over there took a bunch of just office chairs that they needed, and we sell those to them, deliver them, and install a lot of things too. We do some unique stuff. We have a CAD designer who does some very unique furniture for education as well.
One of the things that I'm always a bit of a single issue zealot about is veteran procurement and veteran enterprise. We do believe that you should be hashtag by veteran and that we should be supporting veteran owned businesses in Australia, not just because we're not because we deserve it in any other way than we are the people behind the businesses. So the people who show character and commitment and service and the way we problem solve in our military careers, we're taking that same mentality into being the best business provider we can. So it's not like we deserve handouts or throw me a bone because, I'm in the military, but I really believe that being part of the veteran business community is your point of difference in terms of who you are from a quality perspective. And and the way that you're taking your mentality and your experiences in the military, driving productivity, driving performance, out of your team to ultimately be a great provider. So,
And I would say on that point that it's not about, that we believe we are deserving something that we're not. I find a lot of interactions I have with businesses are very positive, and then when I come to find out they're veteran owned, I'm like, oh, that's probably why they're so efficient or so quick to respond or so, specific on details and accuracy.
absolutely, it should be we shouldn't be looking for handouts in this space, but we should be looking at it as our point of difference. So if you've got two like people, so first of all, I'd love to use the veteran owned as a way to get to the table, but then ultimately when people choose us is because we're the best option at the table, and that we can add something that is rather unique and different. Mate, what's next for you individually? So there's plenty happening. Have you finished up your studies?
Yeah, all my studies. I thought I'd take a break this year and stop studying for a little bit, but
Yeah,
maybe next year I'll start an MBA. That's to be determined.
yeah.
But for myself, I'm just continuing work, continuing business, looking at pop out maybe a kid or two in the next year. And I think the next kind of biggest thing is I'll probably try to look to buy a house over in Perth as some sort of place to lay my head when I go over.
And how do you find this experience of, particularly buying a business and then being able to, 4 months now? How are you feeling being a business owner and putting that feather in your bow?
I feel great. Like the first month, I felt terrible because
Yeah.
we have a 30-day invoice pay policy. So the first 30 days, there was a big black hole of money going out.
Yeah.
But yeah, the last couple of months, it's been going back into the black. So it's been, it's much
Yeah.
better now, much less stressful.
If I can share a lesson about cash flow, like obviously, that 30-day thing is all just a cash flow function. Money coming in, money going out. We had a situation. This is in our first business, and we're rookies. We didn't know really what we were doing, but we gave 30 days, and like, well, why did we give 30 days? It was just, well, isn't that what everyone does? Just give 30 days. And then we got to this moment where we got a $70,000 bill for payroll tax. And we were like, what is payroll? We didn't even know what payroll tax was.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden we get this $70,000 bill, and now we're like, well, hang on, we got a significant cash flow problem. And I asked someone about it. They're like, why are your terms 30 days? And there may be specific reasons for you, but just talking more generally. And she goes, change them to 7. I was like, well, won't people get upset? And I'm like, so we literally just changed them to 7. And then what we found is that most people are paying their bills relative to when Xero or whenever their accounting software says they've got to pay the bill. And we had probably 100 or 200 vendors at that time. Not one of them actually even questioned it. And that was just from lived experience. Not one person actually questioned, why have you changed it? We didn't ask anyone. We just did it.
Yeah,
Not
we're the
saying
same.
that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry,
same.
after you.
30 days is 30 days just been as it is, and that's just what I inherited. So that's another thing to look into and whether it's a good option. But it ties in with our BAS statement and some other stuff as well.
Yeah.
But I got to talk to my accountant next week and see if what's the best option there. So yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not directly suggesting that's what you should do, but just for others out there listening, just when it comes to terms, like cash is king and cash is critical because, we were running a highly successful business. There was lots of money coming in. We had, hundreds of thousands of dollars in accounts receivable, but that $170,000 hiccup, like we need that cash now to pay it. But what's that mean in terms of our expansion? Because we're growing so fast, we need to put more guys on the books and girls on the books. So this is now part of the essence of resource management that I think is really fun, for military people to play with.
Yeah, and I find most people do pay at the end of the month when it's due. Myself, I like to just pay my bills straight up so I know where my money's gone.
If I can share one other thing in our business at the moment, one of our businesses, we hired a CEO probably about 9 months ago, and I'm lucky enough now to be totally out of that business. Was called Trust the Process. We're just about to rebrand it to Offshore Talent. But one of the things that I love about the new CEO, Sean, is not a military guy in any means, but someone who's just really, really experienced in business. And the way that, similar to you're doing here, he's a constant elevator of people. He doesn't solve problems for them. He doesn't even really necessarily dip into their world too much unless they've exhausted their ability to problem solve. And it's something that I feel that I've learned a lot from him and probably could have done better. You know, starting a business bootstrapping and being the subject matter expert all the way through growth, sometimes you think you're more important than you actually are. Because I built this baby from a 1 or 2 man team to now, we got 200 or 300 staff in that business. And it was a real lesson for me when Sean came and took over, just how much I was micromanaging because it was my baby. And I think what you're doing, after you.
I was going to say, and then going to that point, like I'm even looking now and talked to my brother this morning about possibly hiring a business development manager or a capture team lead, so that where I can do my research into market shares and sectors, but there's better people for that job than me learning that from scratch all the way to the top. There's people who know how to do that.
This is also super cool. What you've done coming in and buying existing business rather than going down the path most taken, which is let me try and start something up. You've got established structure. You've got established expertise and process, whether those structures and process be good or bad. And now you can actually come in and use that expertise to tinker and tailor it and get those efficiencies in to make it an even more profitable business. I think it's a super cool way to look at it.
Yeah, it was more of a, like we talked about earlier, risk aversion to starting my own business. I don't have infinite time. I had enough time to buy a business and not to build a business.
Yeah. On that point, what's next business front? Are you going to focus on keeping this one and growing this? Do you feel that you've got any inclinations to try something else or resist the temptation to spread yourself thin?
No, so actually, interesting enough, again, this last week we've been talking about the next steps, which is, I don't know how much to say because it would go into some weird stuff here, but I guess chair and office furniture repairs and those things. I'm looking at maybe acquiring a smaller business that does that and putting it into our side office so that we can expand into that market as well.
I love it. And because you've been able to successfully take this challenge on, buy something, get it through the transition process and get it humming, that would seem like just a natural progression, not an intimidating obstacle.
Yeah, natural progression, just a complementary business to acquire under our banner and continue operating as normal.
Brilliant. Kevin, I really appreciate having a chat today. Number one, never spoke to FastJet flight crew before. So that's, I've got my little fanboy thing out of the way. I do, like I said, every single time I was at Avalon last week and when they go over, it does give me a sense of giddy joy. Hey, do you get used to it or is it fun on a daily basis?
You get used to the daily thing over and over again, but there's always points out of the day or the week or the month that stand out. Avalon is one of those places where it all comes rushing back. You get your tingles back. You're like, oh, this is great. I love all these aircraft and people. So it doesn't go away. It just, some of the day-to-day tasks become more rudimentary.
Because I do find it is a little bit of a thing at Avalon and that kind of stuff. When the people don't have to turn around, you get those people that like, I'm going to resist the temptation just because the jet's going over. I'm cool here. I've seen plenty of them, but I'm not.
I was going to say, I've done that occasionally just to prove a point, like don't turn and look at it because I'm too cool. So I still want to look, trust me. I still want to look. So
yeah, I love it. I love it. Mate, we would love to get you back and host one of our lunch in the mess sessions. I think for anyone listening to this, I believe what you could really share some great insights on is not only the decision process of buying a business. So not only what you've done in the military in terms of telling a bit of that story, but how your decision-making process went to one, why should I go into business? Two, why should I buy a business versus start one up? And then how we actually went through unpacking that. Would you be happy to come back and join us for a Q&A?
Yeah, definitely. Whenever you need.
Right, that'd be brilliant. 7th of May, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, Australia. We would love to get you back, mate, to share and have a one-on-one, invite people to come and not only talk about your story, but what your business processes are. Mate, really appreciate your time today. Have you got a final word for us in terms of any advice that you can give to anyone in the veteran community about should they go into business, why they should go into business, and overcoming any fears that they might have?
I would say that at some point you got to take the leap. But luckily for myself, I was able to dip the toe in and do buying an existing business with positive cash flow while still having a full-time job. If you can do that, great. If not, yeah, you've just got to weigh up the risk versus reward, and if you have the capacity to do those things.
Brilliant, mate. And just before we go, give us a plug for Access Office Industries. Who should be reaching out to you? What problem are you going to solve for them?
Anyone that honestly, anyone that needs a chair, a desk, anything for home office, work office. If your boss is thinking we need to redo our whole floor, we can do that. If your boss says we need to do the whole building, guess what? We can do that too. We've got silent booths, work booths, anything you can kind of think of. We can source it, make it, customize it, or design it.
Brilliant. So we've got accessoffice.com.au. We're going to throw the links down in the bottom of the thread. I'm also going to throw Kevin's LinkedIn profile in there as well, so that anyone that wants can jump on and connect with him more directly. Other than that, the 7th of May, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, we'll throw that into the notes as well. Come along and meet Kevin. Come and say good day. Have an opportunity to ask him about not only his military career, but his transition into business. Kevin, a real pleasure. Thanks for joining us on Military Mindset for Business podcast, and have a great day.
Thanks for having me. Have a good one.
I'm Pete Liston, out.